Hi guys, it's X. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about how to land your first new grad job as a registered nurse. Things we're going to be talking about today is when to network, what do you want in a job, RN versus BSN, depending on what degree you have, what kind of new grad programs are there, what is a new grad program, and then what to put on your resume and how to conduct your interview. But before we get started, if you can just please, before you swipe me away or exit this video, if you can please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you very much, and we're gonna jump on into it. So, networking. When should you start networking to find your job? I'm gonna say immediately. As soon as you start going to clinical as a registered nurse, start looking to see, first of all, what type of nurse do you want to be? There are several different types of nurses out there, whether you work in med-surg, ICU, pediatrics, OBGYN, clinics, dialysis. There is just a numerous amount of different fields that you can work in as a nurse. So when I first got into nursing school, I wanted to be a psychiatric nurse or ER. I loved being in the ER. And then as I got further into it, I thought psychiatric nursing was boring. I was obsessed and loved the psychiatric disorders. But when I saw what the nurses actually did in the psychiatric unit, I was like, you know what, this just isn't for me. Then I wanted to be an ER nurse. I love the excitement of being in the ER. I loved the trauma and the craziness of it. But then I was like, you just kind of stabilize and ship out, and you don't really get to know what goes on with the patient. And then there's a lot of just people who come in for coughs and colds, and I'm like, I just don't want to deal with that. And then when I got into the ICU, I absolutely fell in love with it, and that is where my heart was settled, and that's where I knew I wanted to be. So I got to rotate to 9 different hospitals when I was in nursing school, which was kind of a pain in the butt because every time I went to a new hospital, you had to get a new ID, a new login, and everything. However, I opened my eyes to a lot. What it showed me was the different types of facilities, different companies, different work environments, and it really showed me what I did and did not want in a job. So I would suggest try to figure out what kind of nurse you want to be, and then seek out what hospitals actually will work for you, because not all of them are going to have every type of nursing that you are interested in. For example, I love trauma. Trauma is my specialty. I love trauma ICU, but there's only, I think, 4 or 5 major trauma centers, level 1 to be exact. There's level 1, level 2, level 3, and I wanted to be a level 1 trauma nurse. So I had to figure that out right away, and I couldn't just apply anywhere because not everywhere takes trauma. So you have to figure things out like that. Another thing to take into consideration is if you want to be a pediatric nurse, the hospital that are you applying to, do they have a pediatric center? Are they a big, huge pediatric floor? Because my job, we have NICU patients, but we don't really do peds. So whenever we do get a peds patient, if we can't manage them here, we have to ship them out to another hospital. So you're not going to want to go and start working at a hospital with dreams to become a pediatric nurse if your hospital isn't a huge pediatric center, if you get what I mean. So before you apply, figure out what you want. So for me, I wanted, I think specifically 3 things. I wanted to work at a trauma center. I didn't want to make less than $37 an hour. And this was back in 2016. And the reason why is because I felt like I worked really, really hard for my license. Even though I did not have a bachelor's, I felt like because I worked so hard, graduated with honors, I felt like I deserved nothing less than 37. And 3, I didn't want to wear a uniform, which isn't what's happened now, because now I actually prefer to wear a uniform, but I don't know why. I just wanted to wear whatever color scrubs or cute little tops that I wanted, and I don't know why it was just such a big deal to me. And then another thing that I actually didn't know this in the beginning when I started nursing was the schedule. What kind of schedule are you gonna have? I was very spoiled at my first job where I could schedule myself with a couple of rules. They made me work, I think, 1 Sunday in 6 weeks and then 3 weekend shifts a month, and then I was free to put myself wherever. I didn't realize how big of a deal that was to me until it got taken away at my next job, and I had to work every other weekend. They told me when I had to work. I didn't have a say in it. You could switch shifts, but it was such a pain in the butt, and I was like, I absolutely hate this. I can't travel anymore. I can't, I didn't get vacation time for a whole year, and I was like, would prefer somewhere that just lets me schedule myself, and it works great for me in school now because I'm able to know what my schedule is and change it accordingly for school purposes. Let me see, what else did I want to make sure I have in a job? Oh, okay, so is the hospital you're going to apply to union? If it is union, you're not going to be able to negotiate your salary. And also you want to ask when it comes to pay isn't everything. I'm going to say this right now. I would rather get less pay and be in a hospital that I love and like work with people that I love than to make more money and be unhappy in a facility. So pay is not everything as a nurse. I will say that right now. But if you're working on a union hospital, chances are your pay is not going to be negotiable because they already have a set contract with a set standard pay for every type of, whether you're like an RN1, RN2, RN3, and what that means in different hospitals is like your length of stay there, are you a preceptor, are you a charge nurse, like you kind of get a little bit more money for everything. So if you are going to a hospital with a union, there are union hospitals that like being union because you feel more protected. They can't fire you for just anything, like there's a whole long process. And then there's other places who don't like being union, and they said that they like it because they don't have to go through the union rep in order to talk to the manager to change things. But I don't know, to me it feels like I'd be less protected, but I've never worked in a non-union hospital, so I can't really vouch for that. What else for that? And sorry, I always like never have like a script, so when I come film, I'm like, literally it's just rambling off the top of my head. Okay, we spoke about trauma centers and all that. All right, so you graduated. You get either your ADN or your BSN. We'll talk about that subject next. So what do? What are your chances of getting into a new grad program? And what is a new grad program? So a new grad program is, depending on the hospital, it's like a set standard of how they're going to train you. So every job has a different new grad program, and I would highly suggest you try to find a hospital with a new grad program because your success of transitioning into a new nurse is probably going to be a lot easier for you. I don't really know people who don't have a new grad program, who haven't gone through one, so I can't really speak upon like how much beneficial it is, but in my opinion, from what I've heard, I would think it's best if you find a hospital with a new grad program. So my first job, their new grad program consisted of, I had 3 months with a preceptor. 1 month I was on day shift, 2 months I was on night shift. But if you think about it, that's 12 shifts a month. That's only 36 shifts. So even though it sounds like 3 months, it's really like 36 shifts. And then we used to go to class once a week, 4 hours a day, which I used to kind of think was pointless because a lot of it was things that I had already learned in nursing school, whether it was like stroke, sepsis, or just these classes to kind of better yourself. They taught us how to change central line dressing changes, and I was like, I already know this. Like, why do we have to sit here and relearn it? But honestly, you get paid for it to come in on your day off and, learn these things. And it's nice to kind of refresh your memory. That way you don't really struggle or have to ask for help when you're on the floor. The next new grad program that I've been in, I wasn't a new graduate nurse anymore, but because I was learning how to be an ICU nurse, they made me go through the whole new grad program, and I was stuck on a tele-4 for about 3 to 4 months just to learn how the hospital flowed. Once I got the hang of it, they moved me to the ICU. I shadowed a nurse for about I want to say a month, went to class for 2.5 months, went back to my unit, worked 13 shifts with a preceptor and a clinical instructor, and then had an additional 6 weeks with a preceptor. It felt like a really long drawn out time, but some people need it. I didn't feel like I did, so to me it was kind of like a pain in the butt, but a lot of nurses really appreciate the extra time that these hospitals will give you, and some hospitals will extend your new grad time. Now, I'm gonna caution you, you can get fired from a new grad program. Don't think that you're gonna come be a nurse in a new grad program and you're gonna have like a free ride and they're just gonna train you. They will not. If you are not up to their standards, some hospitals will let you go. Other hospitals will work with you and say, hey, you know what, maybe this unit's not for you, maybe the ICU is not for you, let's put you back on a med surg floor, or it's up to you. I recently was speaking to a friend who told me that she had an ICU new graduate nurse, and she just wasn't succeeding very well, and she said that they ended up firing her because they gave her multiple chances to go to the night shift where it's a little bit slower, the pace is not as fast, and she declined. She didn't want to be a night nurse, and then ultimately they ended up letting her go, and by the time she was willing to go the nights, they told her she couldn't. So just my question for her was, well, what did your new grad consist of? Because I felt like my ICU training was a rigorous program where we sat for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 2.5 weeks, learning absolutely everything about central lines, arterial lines, doing ABGs, like ICP, like every single type of patient you can have. I learned about all these GI tubes that I had never even seen before, never even heard before, and it was really overwhelming. And I asked her, like, do you guys have anything like that? What does your new grad program consist of? And she's like, no, you come to work with us for about, I think it was a little over 6 weeks, but she said that you work one-on-one with the preceptor. And I was like, well, if I was a new graduate nurse and didn't really know what an art line was, and there's a lot to go into it, how to troubleshoot it, how to read the waveforms and all that, if I just came on and was just learning word of mouth but not really understanding how the process works, I probably wouldn't have been very successful in it either. So that's what I'm saying is very important when you are going to seek a hospital. Make sure you ask these questions, like, what does your new grad program consist of? How many shifts do I get with a preceptor? Do I do days and nights? Like, ask a bunch of questions, because these things are going to be very important. Which brings me to, when you graduate, you take your NCLEX and you're all excited, you're finally able to apply to jobs, you're applying and you're not hearing anything back, and you're like, what is going on? Believe me, it's very stressful, but don't get desperate. I graduated with honors. I passed my NCLEX in 75 questions. I'm not going to say I was at the top of my class because I don't know. I know that I was up there, but not exactly like if I was like top 10 or top 5. But I saw all the students that I went to school with who didn't really, I don't want to say care, but like didn't put as much effort or work as hard as me, and they like were getting jobs right off the bat, and I was like, when is it my turn? Like, I don't understand. I was one of the first people to take my NCLEX and one of the last people to get a job. Like, what is going on? Well, let me tell you, every hospital has a different set, like, new grad program schedule. So some hospitals do it twice a year, some do it once a year, and some do it every 4 months. So I had almost a guaranteed job at a hospital because I knew the nurse manager, and I had the dateline for the program was August 3rd. I got my license on August 4th. So the next one didn't start till January. So that put me like 4 to 6 months behind for that new grad program, and it broke my heart because I'm like, I worked at the coffee shop for 10 years. I did not want to work another holiday season. I had given them 11 seasons of my life, and I absolutely refused to do another one. But I had a job, and I started, like I said, I was getting desperate. I was getting discouraged. Like, I was like, okay, maybe I should just send out more applications, because originally I only sent out 3. You might think I'm crazy, but I really wanted to stick to what I wanted, and I wanted no less than $37 an hour. I wanted to wear whatever I want, and I wanted to work at a trauma center. So I started getting desperate and was like, okay, maybe I should like seek out other places, seek out other opportunities. If you have to, and you have bills and you have children to pay for, do it. But if you don't, if you can wait a little bit longer, I would suggest waiting longer for what you want, because you're ultimately, you want to be happy at work. There was a facility that I had rotated to that I was just, all the nurses just seemed so unhappy at. And they asked me, like, are you gonna apply here? And I said, to be honest, no. And they were shocked, like, why? Why wouldn't you want to apply here? And I'm like, I already kind of don't like my job. I'm like, I do it because I have to, but I don't want to leave a job I don't like for another job that I'm going to be unhappy with. I want to work at a hospital that's perfect for me, that's right for me, that I'm going to absolutely love. So if you can, have a little bit more patience. If it's been 6 months, don't get discouraged. Some of these places don't go for your application, don't look at your application for months. I would call if you feel like you're being ignored, or you haven't heard anything. I would definitely call. But for example, one job that I applied to on December, and I had to take a test, which was a month later, and then I didn't get an interview until March, and I didn't start till April. So that's December, January, February, March, April. 5 months to get a job, and I was not a new graduate nurse. So these things take time. I would still follow up and encourage you to do that, but just know that these things do take time. So also to speak on RN versus BSN, just because you have an associate's degree in nursing does not mean that you're not going to be able to find a job. I had an associate's degree in nursing and then went back and got my bachelor's. However, if you want, like I said, you need to figure out where you want to work, and you have to see if it's a magnet hospital. If you are an associate's degree nurse and you want to work in a magnet hospital, I believe they only take bachelor's in science and nursing students. So one thing that I would suggest is the moment you graduate, start looking into bridge programs or transition programs, RN to BSN online programs. The hospital that I almost had a guaranteed job with, they were like, oh, well, we're trying to move to magnet status, so we would prefer somebody enrolled in a BSN program or already have a BSN. So immediately, as soon as I graduated, I started looking for BSN programs that fit me, and I did it. And then, I don't want to say it made me more marketable, but it could. Like, it just depends where you want to work and if the hospital that you are trying to seek employment at is moving towards the magnet status. Let me see. So, your resume and what sets you apart. For those things, like I said, every hospital is different. Their application process is different. My biggest advice to you is make sure your resume stands out. I actually had my best friend send me her resume so that I could see kind of what it looked like, because I've never done a resume. I worked at the coffee shop for 10 years. I'm like, I don't have a resume. And when I saw her resume, I literally was so intimidated and almost wanted to cry. I'm like, wow, she had like 2 bachelor's degrees and straight A's, and then other extracurricular activities that I just didn't have. And I'm like, I have an associate's degree where I have a 2.9 GPA and then I'm a nursing student, I'm an associate's degree, I've worked at this coffee shop for 10 years. Like, how does this set me apart? Like, who's gonna want me? And then I realized that you have to, like, things that I've done in my past, like whether it was community service or I was an LAPD explorer. I used to be a minor decoy for LAPD. So there was a lot of things that I had in my past that I didn't realize were going to be to my advantage. I speak Spanish. So I didn't know that these things were going to be to my advantage until I wrote them down on paper, and I got every single job interview I've ever interviewed for as a nurse, I've gotten that job. So when you apply, like I said, every hospital has a different application method. My first hospital put me through the freaking ringer. Literally, I was a new grad, so I sent my resume with a cover letter. They wanted a 2-page essay on why I wanted to work there, transcripts. They wanted 3 letters of recommendation, and proof that I went to like a accredited school. After that, I got a phone interview. After that, I got a panel interview. And then I had an interview with the CNO. And after all that, they told me, we're gonna call you by Wednesday. I was glued to my phone. Wednesday came, nothing happened. I didn't get a phone call, and I was literally in tears. Like, how did I go this whole way to mess this up and then not get the job? And then Friday morning, I got the job. So I feel like for an application, that is a lot. My second job, I applied, I took that test, and then the test was more like a critical thinking test, and then I went to the interview, got that job. And then my third job, I literally applied. The recruiter called me, asked me a couple questions, asked me when I could come in. I had a job with the director of the ICU, and then I got the job. So everywhere is a little bit different. Tips for your interviews: be yourself. That is the biggest thing that I can say, and know what type of hospital you are interviewing for, whether they're nonprofit, for-profit. And I'm gonna say these things matter because if you're a nonprofit organization, they're probably not gonna, their mentality is gonna be a little bit different than the for-profit hospitals. And in that sense, my for-profit hospital asked me a lot of questions about HCAP scores and JCO core measures, and I didn't know what that was at first when she had told me to prepare in my phone interview that they were going to ask me these questions. So I went home, I literally looked up what HCAPS was, I found out it was a survey that the Center for Medical Services sends out to patients who have been a patient in the hospital for at least a day. They do it, I believe, every 3 months. And it's a bunch of questions like, was your nurse nice to you? Did the doctor explain things to you? Was your room clean? Was the medication passed on time? Like, was your pain taken care of? And then core measures were things for like stroke, heart attack, sepsis, I believe pneumonia, and then there's I think one other one, sorry I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's basically like what you're gonna do at what time frame for these things to prevent them from getting worse. And like stroke, you will do an NIH within this certain amount of hours, you're gonna give TPA, or do a CT within certain amount of hours, you're gonna go, you have like 90 minutes to do this when you have a heart attack, like 90 minutes from the time you get into the hospital to go to the cath lab, and like just stuff like that. So you had to know, they wanted you to know what these things were. So I think that I got that job because I blew them away by what I had presented to them. When I researched what HCAPS was, because I knew they were going to ask me, I went home and made a plan for every single question that the HCAPS asked the patient basically. So I knew that pressure sores were never events. So we're going to talk about never events really quick. Never events are the way these hospitals get their money is, and unfortunately I hate to talk about money in hospitals because it technically is a business, but the Center for Medicare Services puts out these diagnosed related groups, and they will reimburse these hospitals depending on these groups. They give them a set amount of money, but they have never events. So never events could be like falls, pressure sores, and these things are just absolutely not supposed to happen in the hospital. When they do, the hospital is no longer reimbursed from the insurance or from Medicare. They have to cover the cost of these things. Sorry, somebody called me in the middle of that scene I was saying and I lost my train of thought. Anyway, so I literally formulated a plan for every single question that was asked on the HCAP scores, and I talked about how I would round every hour and how that's probably not realistic as a nurse. So I would ask my CNA to round like all the even hours, and I would round all the odd hours. That way every time somebody comes in, we can always ask the patient, are you in pain? Are you do you need to be turned? Like that way these things get done. That'll be less likely for patients to fall or like try to go to the bathroom on themselves, and we would reduce pressure sores, and their pain management would always be taken care of because we'd always be there. Another thing is I would like suggested always being in the room when the doctors came. That way the patients don't get like white coat syndrome, and if they have any questions they can ask you once the doctor leaves. And then another thing was like cleaning as I go so that the room was clean. So these are just things that I made up and talked about to them, and how to improve their HCAP scores. And why was this important to my job? Because they're for a profit hospital. They want to know how you're going to have great customer service and how you're going to decrease their costs. So if that might not be something that's important to my to other jobs. I went to another job that wasn't for profit, and they never talked about HCAP scores, which I thought was really crazy, thinking that if we are not for profit and you're getting most of your money from Medicare, then I would think this would be a really big deal, these never events, but never once spoke about it when I got hired. So have to know what kind of job you're applying to. Really look at the mission statement and see if this is a place that you would want. I remember some asked me, you know, they're a religious facility, would you be okay with that? So I was like, yes, of course I'd be okay with it. Am I religious? No. But am I gonna not want to work here because you guys are? Absolutely not. So I would actually really look into it and broaden your horizons. I didn't realize how many hospitals were out there until I started looking for a nurse preceptor for my nurse practitioner school. I've literally called 32 hospitals within a 50-mile radius of my house, and I absolutely did not know there was 32 hospitals in this area until I actually started looking, which I thought was crazy. But yeah. Don't get discouraged. There's hospitals everywhere. You're just not looking in the right places. You might not know of them. So I would definitely go on Google, write down hospitals near me, search the website, see what you like about it, what you don't like about it. Are you willing to drive this far? Are you not? That might, if you live in Los Angeles, that might be a really big thing that you want to ask, because I've worked 25 miles away at every single job that I've had, and one of them took me literally 30 minutes to and from. The others took me an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. And if that is not something that you want to do, 3 hours a day, 2 hours a day in traffic is a lot after working a 12-hour shift. So these are just things that you need to consider. Also, when I said be yourself in your interview, it is very important. When I got my job, there was 14 of us hired, and the nurse educator told me that we were the only 14 chosen out of 330 applicants. And if you're gonna see a new grad program, apply as soon as possible, because I've heard there's programs that they'll say, oh, we're open for a week, and then they just get so many applicants within the first couple of days and they ended up shutting it down. So don't procrastinate. If you really want this job, make sure you go and do everything you have to do to apply. And I wanted to add, when you are going into these interviews, really be yourself. You are trying to sell yourself. And I remember when I first went into my first interview, I thought I bombed it. Like, literally, the first question they asked me, I'm like, I didn't get this job. And then an hour and a half later, I was still there talking to them. Everybody else had a 30-minute interview. I happened to be the last one, and I was there for an hour and a half. Literally, I talk a lot, but I was so shy in the beginning, and I was so nervous that I almost ruined my chances of getting this job because I was so shy. And when I first walked in and I sat down, I shook everybody's hand and I said hello. The first question they asked me was, tell me about yourself. And I'm like, I'm 28 and I have 2 cats. Like, I don't know. What do you want to know? I literally said that. And they all started laughing and they're like, no, tell me why you became a nurse. And I'm like, I could tell you 100 reasons why you became a nurse, but tell me about yourself. Like, I hate that question with a passion, because it's like, I don't know. What do you want to know? So, don't be shy. Literally know what you're going to talk about. Prep for these questions. A lot of people think that they're going to go into job interviews and they're going to be asked questions like nursing questions and, I don't know, what do you check for heparin and what lab do you do for this? And it's not really like that. I want to say that out of all the hospitals that I've ever ever had a job at, every hospital only asked me maybe one nursing question when I was a new grad. And that was like, what are the 5 rights of medications? How are you going to prevent falls? That was the 2 that they were asked me nursing related. Everything else was customer service based, scenario based. And what I mean by these scenarios is, if you don't get along with your preceptor, like, what would you do? If a doctor told you to push a medication you didn't have an order for, what would you do? So it was things like that. My next 2 jobs that I've gotten were the exact same, where it was all customer service based. What if a patient was upset about something? How would you go about fixing this for the patient? Like, and making sure they know that you care and like stuff like that. So kind of research these tips and like have a scenario in mind before you go hand. There was one hospital that my friends told me they were asking them tons of nursing questions, but out of all the people that I've talked to who have interviewed, only 1 or 2 hospitals that I know of actually ask them specific nursing questions. And when you show up into your interviews, don't go in scrubs. Go in professional attire, business casual. You are not supposed to show up in scrubs. The only time I ever saw people show up in scrubs and it was okay was when the people who already worked at the facility had an interview for the same facility and they just got off work or were going to work and their interview was beforehand. So I think that is the only time it is okay to come in scrubs. Other than that, go business casual. And I think that is going to be it for this video. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment. I will answer the best I can. Hope you got any information that is useful to you out of this video, and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye.